and stuff like that, and to this ongoing problem that was in their midst. And this investigation has been done. This Toronto police officer is going to get charged for neglecting his duty and for apparently insubordination. And the charges stem from this interview in 2016 where he didn't know he had the murderer, but he was interviewing him for something, and he basically let him slip through his fingers due to I guess negligence. So the fire at Agincourt Community Center actually burned for at least 30 hours. It's just super tenacious, and yeah. Fire crews are having a hard time with it, although the better weather is making things a little bit easier. But Agincourt is a freaking write-off. Ryerson U is having this big problem with their student union executive being embroiled in maybe spending funds incorrectly. There's $250,000, so $250,000 in suspicious spending. Peel Region Peel Region daycare worker is facing child pornography charges of possession of child pornography. An arson was caught on camera at a law office. So police are looking for anybody who maybe recognizes the person or the vehicle. The vehicle that was used was stolen, but I mean, even if they can track down the vehicle, maybe they can use that to find, where the vehicle was stolen at. Maybe they can catch the person. So there's the gas supply in Toronto for commuters has been all sketchy. The transit situation, the TTC and Metrolinx, and especially the Scarborough Regional Transit, the RT, has been all super unreliable. Cycling has been difficult, and walking has been difficult. So it's been a really difficult few days for all commuters basically. We're just not used to this level of extreme winter. Well, our stuff is not used to it. For us, it's not so bad, but it's actually our stuff that is more vulnerable than we are. So it might be like a week before the gas supply returns to normal. So in the meantime, drivers are just having to kind of spend extra time driving around to a few different places to find gasoline. And that's just because the transport trucks that carry them to the gas stations were impeded by the poor driving conditions over the last few days. But that's all it takes to cause problems with the gas supply. So downtown, chunks of ice are falling off of stuff because, of course, ice on rooftops got super hard. Nobody just turned it into water and drank it. So now that thaw is on a little bit, these big chunks of ice are actually slipping off of downtown roofs. Well, roofs all over the place. One Canada Post worker almost got smacked when one of them went right through the roof of the back of his Canada Post truck. A jazz singer, Ada Lee, in terms of Peterborough celebrating Black History Month, they've awarded the keys to the city to jazz singer Ada Lee, and so she's accepted them, and so it's a pretty cool moment for Peterborough history and for Black History Month in Canada. Oof, man, my neck. So CTV did this story about how this lady's car is a total lifeline for her child because of the mobility issues and stuff that she has with dealing with him, because he's got special chromosomal conditions or something. And so it's a story about this, how it got stolen. This car got stolen. So she's making this message to the thief, you stole, our car, but also our mobility device. Goes to show a few things, how vehicles, whether you're talking about a car, bicycle, even a good pair of shoes, but certainly TTC and stuff, They can be like transportation itself is a lifeline, but a specific type of vehicle for a specific purpose can be a total lifeline for people. And so my propaganda about this is we got to make sure everybody has access to all the different modes that they have, because she's able to afford a car. Imagine if she had to switch, or she wanted to do her situation on a bicycle. It would be doable on a bike, maybe, but not with these roads, not with this road design. So part of the story is kind of about how essential cars are, but a lot of that need for cars is just because of the roads. So it's a story that has value for, like, on its face for what they're reporting, but it's also a little bit of automobile propaganda in there as well. So apparently, among pregnant women, cannabis use is on the rise. And there's no long-term studies on it, on use of cannabis on at least Canadian health officials who are concerned about this increase are not citing any long-term studies, but they're trying to urge people to, do the precautionary principle of just don't do it. And meanwhile, a lot of moms are doing it because it's helping them solve issues connected with their pregnancy. So moms are trying to figure out how to get the benefits of cannabis without risking, damage to their children. Because cannabis has been illegal this whole time, there's been no long-term studies on this. So this potential kind of palliative thing, we don't know whether it could work in a certain dose in certain ways. We don't, or at least Health Canada can't say that, and they can't say whether, it's dangerous to infants in this way or that way. But the health officials that are talking to the press are basically concerned about abnormal brain development, but the studies that they used to point to in teens showing impaired brain development, they didn't really show impaired brain development. They just showed different brain development among the marijuana users. And that's what you see among kids who are medicated with other medications as well, or if they, if they pursue some other treatment. Everything changes the brain, but follow-up studies on teens, over the last decade have shed a lot of suspicion on this idea that there's clear-cut damage to people's brains from smoking marijuana during a development stage in their life, like being a teenager. I mean, I'd argue every stage is a development stage, but that's a bit more progressive than Canada Health is ready to be. But again, in terms of cannabis, and then also there's a few different stories that are about this difference between causation and, I forget what the other C word is, but there's this other, it's like causation versus coincidence, which is this study cited by the University of Colorado links a low birth weight to the use of cannabis. But this is one of those cases where it could be that the situation that is causing the low birth weight in the first place is also the situation that is like making the mom want to use cannabis. For example, like if she's having, if she's on other medications and she's having issues with appetite, then her baby's going to be underweight one way or the other. And let's say she's using cannabis, and because of that, she's able to take in more food. Her baby still comes in underweight, but it comes in better fed than it would be if she wasn't on the cannabis. But it still gets counted as she used cannabis, her baby's underweight. And so in terms of when people with cancer try to go after the causes and the companies that caused those, those precipitated their cancer and stuff like that, or the government policy that precipitated their cancer and stuff, government always, and industry always stands on the other side of the coin, where they're saying, no, you have to prove that it's not just coincidence. You have to prove that this is what gave you cancer. So if the oil industry or somebody sets up a mine next to your place and it gives everybody you know cancer, you can't say what doctors are telling moms about cannabis. It's the same thing with the vaping situation. So the CBC ran an interview, this like segment about vaping, and did this interview with some young people. One of them said that they were the guinea pigs of this generation. And the CBC didn't mention anything about, they mentioned how the government is trying to be careful about policy and stuff, but they didn't mention anything about what the National Health Service in the UK has done about the issue. And they should. They should just say what the UK is doing with vaping. But they're not. So it's another causation versus coincidence thing where they're saying teens, like young people, are more likely to start smoking cigarettes after they start vaping with nicotine. And I'd argue the same thing. They were already more likely to become cigarette smokers because they already wanted to use nicotine. They just used it in vape form first because it exists in vape form first. So I'd argue they were already interested in smoking. They're already interested in nicotine. That's why they specified that they wanted nicotine with their vape juice, because when they sell it to you, they ask you, what level do you want? And the default is 0. All the stuff comes as 0, and then they add to it, or they give you the version of it that has some nicotine in it. They don't sell the nicotinated stuff to underage people. So it's like buying cigarettes, but the press wants to pretend that it's in this totally different realm. So again, the type of argument that they do not want to apply to other health issues that are more clear cut and that are harming more people. So when oil wells, when a sour gas well kills somebody's entire flock of sheep or something like that, they can't say, look, it's obvious what happened. They can't say what the CBC is telling us about vaping or what the people they interview are telling them about vaping. So US politicians have been challenged to declare a holiday for Americans to vote. And this is something that countries around the world do it either by having national holiday for voting that's on a weekday, or having voting simply on a Sunday, or having some combination of. And so this one US politician is like, no, that's insane. We don't need any more national holidays. That's ridiculous. And don't take, people are like, we don't want to do it on a Sunday because that's civic duty, and we want to keep Sunday for God. So, which is understandable because it's a very religious country. It's a very Christian country. So, speaking of religious stuff, this the premier of Quebec made this huge fumble where he kind of revealed that he doesn't take the Islamophobia problem in Quebec seriously. He's downplaying to the point of denial the incidences of Islamophobic attacks on Muslims, hate speech, and other hate crimes, assaults, and stuff like that. And he's saying that there's no problem with it. There's no cultural Islamophobic problem in Quebec, that's hilarious. That it's like, who are you trying to convince, dude? We are the one province with no Islamophobic problem. Blah, blah, blah. Who the fuck do you think you are? So we're not the only ones here in Toronto having problems with transportation. Roads in the UK, because they're even less ready for it, but they have been having a blast of snow, and their roads are actually looking like, a lot of their roads are looking like some serious post-apocalyptic shit, just roads covered in cars. Everybody's evacuated. You can't get anywhere. This is kind of the problem with cars and roads and stuff, is in any emergency, all of the highways and stuff, the highways, they're just all going to be a big trash heap of cars and you won't be able to get anywhere. It's kind of worrying. I mean, I want bike paths all over the place so at least you can bike around, but we're not going to do that. But that would be nice, at least, or like I don't know, some other. So Tasmania is like in flames. There's no rain in the forecast, and it is fire season there, but this is like unprecedented fire season, of course, because it's unprecedented global weather. So the Kaepernick movement, this is my favorite news story of the day, has actually made the NFL toxic for artists. Well, it's made the NFL toxic. Well, the NFL's racism has made them toxic. A lot of the NFL fans just happen to be black or just happen to be savvy to racism and stuff. The movement that Colin Kaepernick started has snowballed into, for the Super Bowl, the NFL had to settle for having Maroon 5 as the musical guest. That's what the NFL gets for being such a load of racist pieces of shit. Is they had to ask Maroon 5 to do it, and the guys from Maroon 5 had to sort of like they held their noses and said yes. It's so perfect. It's just so perfect. It's like Maroon 5 is now the like new mascot band of white supremacy, but they're not even enthusiastic about it. It's like the most unenthusiastic, like passive white supremacy ever. Talk about settling. Okay, so apparently it was just good aim. So there's somebody like made like a snow sculpture thing by just drawing lines in the snow, like walking around in the snow, and made this kind of like 4 meter wide drawing of a bear, basically, and then put on the belly button of the bear as the last step. And nobody could figure out how they did the belly button. And people were, all the different news outlets are talking about, well, maybe they did snowballs. Somebody got pictures of the two people, but not how they put any of it together, not how they did the belly button. So it was this like big national mystery. But it turns out the person came forward and just said, look, I have decent aim, and I managed to put 5 snowballs in a nice little grouping. for gun nuts, they'd call that a nice grouping, or like I'm into archery, so I'd call that a nice grouping. That was a good grouping of snowballs, but Canada couldn't wrap our head around somebody having that good aim with snowballs. Which is kind of, I think, a little bit sad. We really need to have a little more confidence in ourselves, than that. Like, social media is not what's killing our youth. And we need to have more confidence in, like, our abilities. So the thing about the cold weather is, if you're getting cold and then you're sort of, like, huddling up and bundling up and just, like, not moving around too much because you kind of want to stay just, like, huddled up, it just backfires. Like, you just get colder because you're not moving around enough. Your metabolism gets all messed up because you're not getting enough exercise. You get a little depressed. You lose some sleep. The whole thing is what leads, and then also just being like indoors more with a bunch of other people is what leads to having a cold in the winter. So it's like counterintuitive, but when you're cold, you got to do something physical, just like take out the garbage, or do some shoveling, or just do some sweeping, or just something manual and physical, just to raise your body temperature a bit. And then also when you're, you have to be out of breath like once a day to stay mentally healthy, to stay able to sleep and stuff like that. You have to just do something that puts you out of breath each 24 hours. And you have to maintain ventilation wherever you are. You can't be having stale air, because it just leads to bacteria and makes you sick and stuff. You got to have plenty of sunlight. Go ahead and use double windows and whatever to keep the heat in, but you got to have plenty of sunlight, and you still have to have ventilation. So it's like, that's how you avoid illness in the winter. Plenty of exercise, diet, normal stuff. Vaxing, not vaxing, like in terms of getting vaccines and stuff for flus. You got to decide what your strategy is for that, or whether you're washing your hands all the time to like not get exposed to other people's germs, or whether you're trying to get exposed to other people's germs to keep your immunity going. You got to decide on that and then make your protocol work for that. So you can do this winter thing. The problem is our infrastructure is all going to be messed up by the extreme, like the flooding, the fires, the extreme cold, the extreme heat, like every single thing that we have just cracking open. I mean, none of the Gardner that we're going to be building is going to be cracking open while we're building it, because we'll be building it for last century's weather. So the Gardner is probably never going to get reconstructed, because they'll keep having to change how they're doing it, and they'll be like, this is way too expensive. And they'll be like, should we be like the Canadian government and buy this project wholesale like we already decided to do now that the price has ballooned into $4 billion or something? Because anyway, oh my gosh. This is your host, Dorian Sky, wishing you a fantastic and productive Saturday.